Imagine waking up in the year 2023, only to find out that time travel has been publicly accessible since last December. The news is flooded with headlines about time tourists visiting ancient Rome, people taking weekend trips to the Jurassic period, and even stories of historic figures who have just returned from a holiday in the future. Is this world really as crazy as it sounds? Well, not entirely. In fact, there are some very reasonable explanations for why such a thing would be possible. Theoretical physicists have been coming up with potential ways to make time travel possible for decades, and many of these concepts are far more feasible than you might think. So what if time travel was real? How would we go about doing it? Do we need a big budget and scientific backing, or can anyone afford a trip through time? Let's find out. You're going to need money, lots of it. We all knew that this was coming. If time travel were possible, it wouldn't come cheap. But how expensive would it be? That depends largely on which method you choose to take. As far as theoretical physics is concerned, there are two main methods for achieving time travel, and they require drastically different budgets. The first option is to build a time machine based on the concept of wormholes. Wormholes are theoretically possible bridges between 2 points in spacetime, allowing you to travel instantaneously across the universe. In theory, wormholes could also allow you to travel back in time by connecting you to a point in the past. Unfortunately, creating a wormhole would require an almost infinite amount of energy. So much so that even the most powerful supercomputer in the world couldn't calculate the required amount. Some physicists believe that this number would exceed the total energy contained in the observable universe. That means that building a time machine via wormholes isn't an option for the foreseeable future, unless you happen to stumble upon an already existing wormhole. In that case, you'll need a starship and a whole lot of courage, assuming that such an entity hasn't been claimed by intergalactic authorities already. But wormhole-based time machines aren't the only theoretical possibility. The other option is to create a time machine using a particle accelerator. While still highly speculative, scientists have recently made significant progress in calculating the energy required to create closed time-like curves using this method. The result? 317 trillion joules. To put that in perspective, the largest particle collider ever built, the Large Hadron Collider, requires around 100 trillion joules of energy to operate at full capacity. It takes about 20 minutes for the LHC to consume that much energy, meaning that its time machine would run for just under 7 hours before breaking down. Still, it's enough time for a quick trip to the supermarket. But this option comes with its own set of problems. While it's now clear that creating a time machine is not only possible, but potentially affordable, operating one would be prohibitively expensive. To break even, you'd need to transport at least 86 billion people through time for each hour it runs, making the cost per person around $293 US. Now, that doesn't sound like a bad deal, does it? Well, unfortunately, there's a catch. The safety of your passengers would depend on maintaining a stable space-time continuum, which is easier said than done. Traveling in time creates a number of unexpected issues, particularly when it comes to avoiding paradoxes. Imagine if someone from the future accidentally killed Adolf Hitler before he took power. Would that make World War II happen? Or consider what might happen if someone traveled to the distant past and introduced modern diseases to an uncontacted tribe. Even something as simple as stepping on a butterfly in the wrong place could have massive, unforeseen consequences. Scientists have theorized that these kinds of changes to the timeline could create a new, perhaps even worse, version of reality. This hypothetical version of our planet is often referred to as the evil universe, and it's generally believed to be a place where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Of course, that assumes that the universe can't be any worse than ours, which is debatable. But the issue remains that introducing time travelers into the past carries with it a huge risk of causing untold devastation. Time travel might also break the laws of physics. Physicists haven't reached a consensus on whether time travel is possible, let alone safe. According to Einstein's theories, it should be theoretically possible to create a time machine. But it goes against the observed tendency of the universe to move from order to disorder. If nothing else, this means that traveling through time would likely be impossible without causing some kind of major anomaly in the space-time continuum. Then again, that's just a theory. So what if you could somehow make it work? You'd still have to contend with the numerous legal complications involved. Traveling to the past poses a number of difficult questions. For example, if you brought back something from the past, like an ancient artifact, would it be considered stolen? And if you prevented someone from doing something in the past, would that make you a murderer? These are obviously extremely complicated issues with no easy answers. And it's for that reason that many scientists argue that time travel should remain forbidden. Even if you could afford a trip and overcome the physical and legal challenges, you'd still have to consider the moral implications. What if someone traveled to the past and killed Lincoln before he could end slavery? Or what if someone went back in time to warn people about a major disaster that was about to befall them? Because of the potential for abuse, many scientists argue that time travel should never be allowed, even if it becomes physically possible. Finally, there's the small matter of changing history. Over the years, many historians have suggested that certain events in history may not have happened when or how we think they did. Some have even gone so far as to suggest that well-known historical figures may have lived longer or shorter lives than the dates recorded by historians. If this were true, it could mean that time travel has already happened. However, there's no concrete evidence to support these claims, and most historians agree that there is simply too much verifiable proof that these events happened when and where they re-believed to have. So while it's fun to speculate, there is no reason to think that the ancient Egyptians built their pyramids 100 years earlier than we think, or that Julius Caesar actually died in 44 BC instead of 44 BC. But what if time travel were real and affordable and legal and safe? Would anyone want to do it? For many people, the answer is probably yes. There are countless historical events that people would love to witness firsthand, from the construction of the Great Wall of China to the signing of the Magna Carta. There are also plenty of reasons to travel to the future. Take, for example, the opportunity to see how humanity deals with the ongoing climate crisis, or to witness the long-awaited sequel to Avatar. Of course, not everyone would be so eager to step foot in a time machine. For every person who wants to see the pyramids being built, there's another who doesn't want to risk contracting a deadly plague in the process. It's likely that demand for time travel experiences would be split evenly between those wanting to visit the past and those wanting to visit the future. But what would each of these trips entail? If time travel were made legal and affordable tomorrow, there would likely be a rush to open businesses that offer unique experiences in both the past and the future. Trips to famous historical events would probably be the most popular, as would visits to more private moments in history. For example, someone might pay thousands of dollars to be present for their parents' first date, or to see their great-grandparents meet for the first time. Trips to the future would be slightly less eventful, but no less exciting. Imagine seeing the next SpaceX launch in real time, or witnessing the unveiling of the next iPhone. The possibilities are really endless. A time travel business could thrive by offering trips to key moments in history, but they'd have to be careful to avoid causing any paradoxes. They could probably get away with sending a few tourists back to ancient Rome, as long as they be careful not to spread disease or otherwise interfere with daily life. But it'd be much more difficult to send someone back to witness the signing of the Declaration of Independence. A single misstep could completely change the course of history and cause unintended consequences that could destroy the entire timeline. Time travel businesses would also have to consider the length of their trips. Would customers be allowed to stay in the past 4 weeks at a time? Or would they be restricted to observing a particular event from a distance, before being sent back to the present? It's likely that a combination of both would be allowed, but ultimately it would be up to the individual companies to decide what level of risk they were willing to take on. After all, if one of their customers caused a major historical event to play out differently, it could easily be blamed on them. Now watch how time travel could work, or check out how long would it take to get there. Infinite Monkey.